Hey, God bless. You can be seated. You can be seated. Let's thank God again for our worship team. Love to see some of these young people up. It's fantastic. Pushing and raising up the next generation. That's what we need. We need that. We need that. This is so good. So good to be in not only, in Darwin, but C3 Darwin. I always wanted to come here. I told the church this morning in the services, I always wanted to go to Darwin. It just was there. And, you look at the map of Australia, and you're on top. Everybody else is below you. That's got to mean something. Yeah, I like what Pastor Lars said. It's either people that have never come here say, "What are you going to Darwin for?" And people that have been here say, "Oh man, you'll love it." You got amazing sunset. I think you got great weather now. I haven't been here a whole year, but I think so far, they said, "Is it hot?" And I said, "No, hotter than Texas." We're hot. We don't mind the heat. You get acclimated. Who cares? It's a great place. But you know what's even greater? What I love about this place? I love C3 Darwin. And one thing I really appreciate is there's sometimes in life, especially a church, you cooperate with culture because there's elements of any culture you just cooperate with. Sometimes you counter culture. It demands a counter. And one thing I just picked up from your pastors, in one aspect, they will counter a culture in this city. And that is, some people might come and go, but why do you want to leave something? And why do you want to leave a church that has such a great purpose and such a great destiny and such a great future? That means more than anything. You hook your wagon to something like this and watch what God will do. So we just salute both of you. The Bible says it's interesting, and I'll just diverse just a little bit because there's some things need to be I could say that somebody else can't say. And that is, have you ever received a gift from a distant relative? It might have been a mother, grandmother, somebody that, as far as cost, it wouldn't mean a whole lot, but you would never part from it because of who gave it to you. You know what I'm talking about? It might have been a family heirloom, something that was passed down generationally. You wouldn't sell it because of who gave it to you. And when you honor the gift, you actually honor the one that gave you the gift. So because you sense that connection. So by taking care of the gift, you're honoring a grandparent, a great-grandparent, somebody in your family because they gave it to you. The Bible says God has given gifts to men. Apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher. Your pastors are a gift from God to you. And when you honor them, you actually have honored the one that gave you the gift. So that's important. So I would say pray for them, love them, send them on a holiday every once in a while. That's always good. But we're so glad to be here. We love these guys, the authenticity, the realness. They are who they are, and that's what I appreciate. Ginger and I have just been bragging ever since we got here. I've heard a lot of great stories about C3 Darwin. And just real quickly, we do have resources out in the, right by the cafe and the foyer of the church. I always tell people, I said, if you see a resource as an expense, don't do anything with it because it won't help you. But if you see it as an investment, it's amazing what it will do. We've got these little USB sticks. Thank God for technology. We got 115 messages on those, 17 different series, 115 messages. Those sell for $50, and those are all audio. Then we have a video 412 Bible school. It's now being broadcast in Iran, Turkmenistan, Turkey, Afghanistan, Middle East, soon to go into Botswana, Bulgaria, the Hispanic world, Russia, and so on. But it's amazing because everybody needs leadership. How to increase your influence. Everybody needs an increase. All jobs obtained and maintained, 85% of all jobs obtained and maintained are done through attitude and people skills. Only 15% of any job anywhere in the world is gained by your education. An education might get you in the front door, but won't keep you there. Never keep you there. All jobs. And so the whole thing of how to increase your influence, developing people skills in your life, your attitude towards what you do is amazing. And that's how far you're going to get. You're salt and light. You're a person of influence, but how far your influence goes depends on how well you get along with people. So we got that, the character of a leader, how leaders can finish strong, how leaders can maintain their strength and energy, and so on. So check it out. How many have their Bibles? Bible, iPhone, iPad, smartphone, whatever you want to call it. Hold it up. Wave it around. Make the devil mad. I want you to find Luke's Gospel, if you will. Luke's Gospel, chapter 6. Luke's Gospel, chapter 6. I want to read a couple of verses in Luke chapter 6. And if I put a title on this, it's just, there it is right there, stretch. Stretch. You'll never get anywhere unless you stretch. You never do anything unless you stretch. You got to move out. Life is designed by God. And because life is designed by God, for life to continue inside of us, in us and through us, there has to be a stretch. And if there's no stretch, the tendency is just to pull back, get into arenas that are comfortable, go on I don't know if you use this term, we would call it rabbit trails. And that is, I'm used to going down the same roads all the time. I'm used to doing the same thing all the time. I eat the same food. I go to bed at the same time. I wake up at the same time. Life becomes so predictable. And when life becomes predictable, then you stop stretching. There's nothing that comes out of the ordinary. There's no risk where life is concerned. When you look at the disciples, Jesus takes 12 guys, and he just said, go into all the world. Preach the gospel to every creature. You talk about stretching. He didn't offer them a retirement program. He didn't offer them an insurance plan. He didn't offer them health insurance. He didn't offer them anything. He just said, take it and go. The greatest men and women that have ever lived are people that'll just take it and go and figure it out along the way. Something happens when you do that. I'd get into a story right now, but I can't do it. But you ought to look it up. It's a fabulous message on leadership called The Message to Garcia. My God, it's good. Got hair on it. I mean, it's good. Luke chapter 6, listen to this, verse 6. And it happened on another Sabbath also that he entered the synagogue and taught. A man was there whose right hand was withered. So the scribes and Pharisees watched him closely whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. He knew their thoughts. He said unto the man with the withered hand, arise, stand here. He arose and stood. Jesus said to him, I'll ask you one thing. Is it lawful to heal? Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or evil, to save or to destroy? And when he looked around at them all, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. He did so, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. If the only thing I do is see this story in the context of a story that actually occurred 2,000 years ago, it will do very little in my life. Every story in the Bible happened historically. Every story in the Bible is happening. So when I connect those dots, that's when God's word speaks. That's when it comes alive. That's when it's able at that moment to impart into the hearer the life that's inside of those words of that story. As long as I see it in a historical setting, and I visualize 2,000 years ago, here's a guy, boom, 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 it'll do very little for me. But the moment I bring it into the reality of today, because it's happening today, it's interesting that it said his right hand. It called attention to which hand? It didn't have to, but the very fact that the Bible calls attention to the right hand is extremely significant. Because all through God's word and all through history, the right hand has always had significance. You shake with the right hand. If you had a table set up, a head table with the speaker would always sit to the right. We reach out with the right hand. Years ago in Christian circles, when a person would come and be a part of a church, they would call it extending the right hand of fellowship. Jesus was raised and seated at the right hand of authority on high. The right hand is significant in the fact that it creates the picture of influence. It creates the picture of relationships. It creates the picture of vitality. It creates the picture of strength. It creates the picture of influence and authority. And it said his right hand was withered. Didn't say it was dead. Said it was withered. In other words, here's an individual, just like many of us, that find ourselves in a kind of a withered state. We might have seen a time where there was more energy, there was more strength, there was more vitality, there was more enthusiasm, there was more passion, and now we're not quite there. And so we need something. And that's where this man is, his right hand. There can be a lack of energy, a lack of vitality, a lack of strength within our life, a lack of influence, a lack of authority. Listen, I want you to listen. Put yourself in this picture. Because we've all found ourselves in this picture at one time or another. We've all gone through. Nobody lives on a continual high. We all find ourselves with our ups and downs. We all find ourselves in different seasons of life to where we can look and say, I'm just at a low point. I'm not where I need to be physically. I'm not where I need to be mentally. I'm not where my marriage is not where it needs to be. So on and so forth. We can continue right down the line. That's this story. And Jesus is about to change all this. He's about to say something that's so simple yet so profound that energy, influence, vitality, excitement, health, authority is about to be restored into this individual's life. That's what I want. That's the huge takeaway here. And if we don't see the big takeaway, then we just walk out of these doors in so many minutes with just a nice story. But you got to capture it. So put yourself in the story. Put yourself in this man's, your right hand. It's just not quite there. I mentioned this morning, I read an article years ago. I don't know if this works for Australia, but I'm sure it does. It said that 57% of Americans are tired all the time. Tired all the time. And I see it today. I see it more today. I see people, they have to sleep 12 hours. Somebody like, I sleep 12 hours. You're sleeping half your life. You're sleeping. It's stupid. Get up. I had a grandfather. He said, my grandmother said, I want to see holes in your shoes, not holes in the sheets. And so there's something that happens. There's a massive emotional drainage today in our culture. People are drained. Their emotional bank account is bankrupt. They're at wit's end. They're just kind of robbing from Peter to pay Paul. They're just not where they need to be. Depression. I mentioned this in the latter service this morning. Depression's at an all-time high. It became such an epidemic in Australia. I never forget, years ago when I was out here, they had posted in all the public bathrooms. You did an entire campaign. It was in the Qantas Airline magazine. I forget the campaign, but you were supposed to ask somebody if they were all right, something like that. What was it called? Are you okay? Yeah, I remember that. I mean, listen, when we have that, there's a problem that the church has the solution for, and we got to address it because we face the same thing. We're not absent from it. Look at this individual. He was depleted of something. Jesus calls him out. Now, the first thing I want you to see is this, that our disabilities, our inabilities do not take away from what God can do in us and through us. Just because you've got a situation or a disability or a distraction or something's going on in your life, you can minimize, well, God can't do it through me because of this, or God can't work through me because of this. They don't disqualify you. There was a survey done years ago, and they surveyed the top world leaders over a long period of time. I mean, men like Winston Churchill. People that affected the world in their generation. And they found that 70% of them came from either broken homes, physical disabilities, or some kind of impairment where their life was concerned. They weren't perfect. They didn't come out of a great background, 70%. But those things don't disqualify you. I had a friend, close friend, he's in heaven now. One of the closest friends I've ever had. His name was Dave. And I never met a guy like him. I really mean that. I miss him. I miss him to this day. He was an unusual man. He was from Moose, Wyoming. Nobody's heard of Moose. Who would name a town Moose? When he met his wife, Jan, she didn't believe him. She thought it was his pickup line. And so he pulled out his driver's license, and sure enough, Moose, Wyoming. Dave was an unusual guy. He was classified in his very young years of a major learning disability. In fact, not only did he have this disability, but the government actually used him like almost a test case. And they stayed with him all the way through high school and even into college, testing his learning disability. Well, Dave got married to Jan, and they had 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. And about the time when the Soviet Union collapsed, about 1990, Dave was in his house in Wyoming. He was watching the news, and he sees this whole, it's an amazing thing, Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. The thing collapses, and all these nations came into their own. And Dave caught a vision. He caught a vision. The man that had a learning disability, the man that the United States government tested all of his formidable years, even into his teenage years, to try to see if he could overcome this, caught a vision. Something about a vision that affects people. You can live a nominal life, very easy life, until something stirs on the inside. A vision is a catalyst. It's the only thing that God gave a human being that reaches down on the inside and finds every gift, talent, and ability and unites them. And then it reaches not only on the inside, it reaches on the outside and pulls people in that want to be a part of that dream. Are you with me? Are you part of that vision? Without a vision, people go nowhere in life. They do nothing in life. They exist. God never called you to exist. Dave caught it. He turns to his wife, Jan. He said, I think we ought to go to the nation of Belarus. The Belarusians are called, the word Belarusian means white Russian. They're 99% pure Russians. He didn't speak Russian. He didn't know anything about Russia. He just felt this thing. So he calls up a Bible school, at that time one of the most renowned Bible schools in the United States, called Christ for the Nations, out of Dallas, Texas. He calls them up to get information. They thought he was calling up to enroll. He wasn't calling up to enroll. He just wanted information. But Dave was such a nice guy, they dominated the conversation. They enrolled him on the phone. It's a true story. You can't make this stuff up. Before he knows, he was on his way to Dallas from Moose, Wyoming, with a wife and 4 children, and sitting in a Bible school. A good buddy of mine that's still very close, he sits on our board of directors, was the missions director at that time of Christ of the Nation. His name is Larry Hill. Well, Larry was smart, because sometimes you don't need 2 years of Bible college. After 6 months, Larry saw it. He's just like your pastor. He saw things. You got to see things in people. And when you got to see things in people, you release them. People release people. Because people see things in people. That's why you need people. That's why you need a church that's good and godly pastors, because they see things on the inside. You can't see you. You can't. You never have. It's scary, I know. But you've never seen your face. None of you have. You've only seen a reflection or an image of your face. You don't even know what you look like. Yeah, but I saw a picture. That picture might be wrong. I look myself in a mirror. There's all kinds of mirrors, honey, and they don't always show the same face. You've never seen you. The only way to see you is for me to extract your eyeballs and turn them back so you can see yourself. And if I did that, you still couldn't do it. The only way you can see you is by somebody else seeing you. That's why God uses people to see people. God uses people to release people. God uses people to get out of people what God put in them. My buddy Larry looked at him and said, Dave, you got it, man. You got it. Get out of here. So Dave enrolled in a Russian speaking class, got enough Russian to make him dangerous. Loaded up. You can imagine this. You got to understand, this is 1990. He loads up a family of 6 with not knowing anything. And he boards an airplane, gets to Frankfurt, has a layover in Frankfurt, Germany. When he's in Frankfurt, he's pulling his luggage because they got a layover, and he bumps into a guy accidentally. You know, he's real polite. He's not like me. Dave's real polite. And he bumps into this guy. Oh, I'm sorry. Strikes up a conversation. And this guy's talking to him. He's talking to him. This guy said, where are you going? He said, Minsk, Belarus. He said, that's where I live. And he pulls out a business card, hands it to him. Well, Dave gets in. He told him, he said, when you get there, look me up. So he gets there, and he stays in the Orbita Hotel. Ginger and I have been there several times. The Orbita Hotel, you could stay there back then for $1 US a night. He lived there for 2 years. That's true. Family of 4. He made friends with all the maids, and they would bring in him extra food because they liked his kids. They were loading them up. You know, he's a friendly friend. And so he looks this guy up. You know, it's the only contact he's got. And he looks him up, and you got to understand Russian reality. In Russia, when men bond, they go to these steam rooms. It's a true story. And they sweat. And you bring in a branch from a white willow tree. And you beat the guy's back with a branch from a tree. You see, that's what aspirin comes from, white willow bark. That's where Bayer, that's a German company, that's where it comes from. And it creates like a little kind of a psychedelic thing. So you're sweating, and the guy's beating your back. And then you turn around, and he beats your back. So they're doing this once a week, beating each other, sweating. Well, you know how conversations go. They tend to get very surface, and then after a while they get a little deeper. So finally, after several weeks, this guy looks at Dave, and he said, what are you trying to accomplish in my nation? Dave looked at him and said, well, he said, I want to be a producer and a distributor of Russian contemporary gospel music and distribute it across the entire former 11 time zones of the Soviet Union. And this guy looks at him and said, you can't do that. This is Russia. You can't do that. Not without my help. And Dave said, well, who are you? He said, I'm the #1 Russian mafia boss. He's been beating the #1 Russian mafia boss for a month. And this guy said, we know distribution. Dave led that man to the Lord. That guy is saved and filled with the Holy Spirit to this day as I speak. Dave became the largest producer and distributor of contemporary Russian gospel music in the entire world. His TV broadcast, according to the Russian government stats, every time it aired, he did these music videos, which were as edgy. They weren't Christian. They were as edgy as they come. These guys are tatted. These guys are pierced. These guys are out there, but they're writing this stuff. It's coming out of him. He's capturing that next generation, and his viewing audience was 50 million people every time that thing viewed. Amazing story. You can't fit the buck. God wanted you. He stretched. He went as far as. Are you with me? My God, I got to hurry up. Got to hurry up. Stretch. Disadvantages don't disqualify you. The next thing, I love this, what Jesus did with this guy. The next thing, it's in verse 8. Verse 8, it says in the King James, the New King James, he said, rise and stand here. One translation, I love this other one, he said, get up and stand up. That's my favorite. I don't know where it came out, but I read that. Get up, stand up. In other words, rise above your disability. Don't let it anchor you. Don't let it hold you down. I wrote this down, and introspection is good for a moment, but the longer you stay on introspection, it's dangerous, because introspection will reinforce your failure patterns. If you don't believe me, look at Elijah. He got so much introspection in his life, always looking in, that he formed conclusions that were absolutely untrue. I'm the only one that hasn't bowed his knee to Baal. And God said, I got 7,000 that have never done what you've done. Too much introspection is dangerous. There's time that you have to get up. You have to rise up. You have to rise above it. You have to look at life and say, it is what it is. God never made, there's no perfect human being outside of Jesus, so I'm going to rise above this thing and do it anyhow. Several years ago, I was in a place called Jamshed, India. Jamshedpur. It's in the central eastern part of India. They told me it used to be called the missionary graveyard. The individual that hosted the event, he was a graduate from a Bible school in Bangalore, but he was from Jamshedpur, and he said it took him 7 years to get his first convert. But by then, the work had grown. A lot of things had happened. So we went in there with a pastor's conference. We had a tent. We set up a tent. All these guys, all these men and women came. Then we overflowed the thing, so we had another tent. And we created actually a media stir. But that's not the point of the story. In India, if you know anything about India, you know they were colonized by Great Britain. So if you do anything in India, you got to give them 2 breaks a day. They got to have that tea break around 10 o'clock. Tea and a biscuit. I don't drink really tea, and to us a biscuit was something you give a dog, but in here we don't call them biscuits. So then you got to give them one in the afternoon. So that's fine. So we had all this thing set up in a field. And they're out there, I think it was about 10 o'clock, they're out there, and it's in April. It's the worst month in India. It's hot. I mean, hot. We had this giant fan, and I'm sitting with my back to the fan, blowing on me. And the guy that had organized the event's next to me. He's next to me. And we're just sitting there. We're the only ones in the tent. And as we were sitting there, I looked over this direction, and I saw this older man come walking in. He had a white cane. And he had 2 sacks around his neck. Great big sack here and great big sack here. And he came in, he sat down. Now, every once in a while, have you ever seen somebody and they just got your attention? They just, for whatever reason, they stood out. And I watched this man. And so I asked the guy next to me, I said, who is he? Who is that guy? He said, well, he's blind. And I said, yeah, I could see that. But what's his story? He said, well, let me tell you a story. He said, see those 2 sacks around his neck? I said, yeah. He said, those sacks are filled with Bibles and Bible literature. He said, in fact, according to the Indian Bible Society, which is the second oldest Bible society in the world, several years ago they had their bicentennial. The only one that's older is America. They're the second oldest in the world, over 200 years old. They keep accurate records. According to the Indian Bible Society, that blind man, now listen to me, this will help you. That blind man has passed out more Bibles and more Bible literature than anybody in the history of this nation. I thought, you're kidding. He said, oh, no. He said, in fact, everywhere that blind man has gone, he's walked all over India, walked. He's been led by a little boy. A little boy always led the blind man. And every little boy that ever led the blind man grew up to become a pastor. I said, you're kidding. He said, no. He said, you know how I know that? I said, no. He said, because at one time, I was the little boy. And I took a picture of the guy. I still got that picture in my office. It meant so much to me. Because in the culture of India, a blind man, that culture told him, find a corner, find a street corner, get yourself a tin cup, and sit there and beg the rest of your life. But somehow, that blind man didn't look at his disabilities. Somewhere he stood up. Like Jesus said, get up, stand up. He rose above it. He might not have had eyes, but he had a mouth. He might not have eyes, but he had ears. He had arms. He had legs. He didn't look at what he didn't have. He discovered what he did have. And when he took what he did have, he used it with everything he had. And that guy affected thousands and tens of thousands of people. Don't let anything stop you. Never camp around a disability. Problems are never a place of permanence. They're a place of passage. When you walk through the fire, when you walk through the flood, when you walk through the water, you don't camp in it. You walk through it. Rise up. Don't let it stop you. Don't look at a cultural context and say, I can't do something. Do it anyhow. Don't look at life and say, well, my family, my father, my mother, nobody's had a perfect upbringing. Don't live based. Don't drive. You can't drive through life looking at the rearview mirror. You ever seen a bicycle? Bicycle? Have you ever seen a bicycle? Picture yourself on a bicycle. You're on it. Your feet are on the pedals. The kickstand's up. Your hands are on the handlebars. But the bicycle is not going anywhere. What's going to happen? You're going to fall. Why? Because you're not going anywhere. A bicycle only has balance when it's going forward. And life only has balance when it's moving forward. Life cannot stand still. Rise above it. I don't care what it is. Rise above an infirmity. Ginger and I have got a good friend. He was actually a friend of our son's. He was a co-worker in a former company that our son worked for in Long Island. Our son lives in Long Island, New York. And so I always wanted to meet him. Pastor Lars, he always told me about Clint. I want to meet Clint. I want to meet Clint. He told me about Clint. So we were over there. And I said, is Clint going to come? Yeah, I think he might come. I think Clint might come. So pretty soon the phone rang, the cell phone. He said, Clint's coming. He said, let me get up and open up the gate for Clint. You see, Clint is one of the shortest human beings in the world. There's only 300 people in the entire world that has this type of dwarfism. He's that tall. He's the same height as a 2-year-old baby, but he's wide. When his mother gave birth to him at 26 years of age, and Clint was born, the doctors took one look at him, and they scared this young mom. See, there's good doctors and there's not so good doctors. They scared this. The doctor said, get rid of him. Get rid of him. Put him in a home. Get rid of him. She left the hospital petrified. She went home. Her husband went back to the hospital. He was in the incubation ward. And he looked at little Clint, and he came back home, and he said, he's got a big head, but he's awful cute. We got to take him home. Clint's an amazing human being. You see, Clint, with all of his disabilities, rose above it. That guy can preach the hair right off your arm, if there is such a thing. Clint he's been featured on ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox News in America. He started his own basketball team called the New York Towers. Won a championship, is the general manager of his own team. He's a day trader on Wall Street. He's absolutely brilliant. When the Summer Olympics were held in Atlanta, Georgia in 1996, Clint was privileged to carry the Olympic torch. He was 2 behind President Clinton at that time, carrying the Olympic torch. He helped design with General Motors his own vehicle. That guy, he's married to this day. I mean, like he told me, he said, most guys can't even find a wife. He said, I got 2 girlfriends. At that time, he had 2 girlfriends at one time. I said, way to go, Clint. Way to go, Clint. And he's that big. He's an amazing individual. Nothing stops. He's an inspiration to me because nothing stops him. He rose above it. He rose above it. He has every disability. He can't raise his arms any higher than this. His hands don't bend.
He spent 6 out of 6 years. He spent 3 years in the hospital. He was in 2 full body casts with a halo on his head. They cut his ribs out and made vertebrae because his spine protrudes that far out of his back and it was collapsing his lungs. He has steel bars inside of his back. Every disability you can think of. And he laughs, he jokes, he's funny. He's reached the top of his career. He has his own vehicle that nobody else can drive because you're not like Clint. And it's amazing. He gets everywhere. We were in Manhattan. Nobody in their right mind drives in Manhattan. You take taxis or you walk, but you don't drive. And there was Clint driving. And I thought, my God, how'd you get down there? I drove. He rose above it. Or he rose above it. He rose above it. I don't have a problem next to Clint. I don't have disabilities compared to Clint. I look at Clint and I say, what am I complaining about? What am I talking about? Everything in life told him you can't. And when that guy preaches, he'll make you weep because he'll look at you as a raspy voice. He said, my dad is my hero. His parents sacrificed for him. Now he's got his own house, a little tiny house. I mean, it's a normal house, but everything's tiny. Everything except the TV's big. He just has it way down here. He's an amazing guy. Are you with me? Are you listening? Listen, he rose up. You got to rise above it. No matter what it is, kick it, knock it down, but rise above it. Don't lick your wounds. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Rise above the thing. There's something bigger to do, somewhere greater to go. Rise above it. And then the last one. Jesus looked at him, and he said, stretch out your hand. Now I want to conclude on this because I think it's powerful. You know, we're entering close to the Christmas season. Christmas season can be great times of evangelism. Great times of reaching. Well, you never reach until you stretch. I love what he said. Listen to it. Stretch out your hand. Stretch out your hand. Amazing things happen when you and I stretch our hand out to another human being. The stretched out hand can change things. The Bible said Jesus touched them and they were made whole. Didn't say how he touched them. The human touch is so powerful. And when you're full of God, it's even more powerful. One of the guys in our church, Paul was one of the man that was instrumental in getting me saved. He brought me to a Baptist church. I was raised Catholic. Never been to a Baptist church in my life. The guy gave an altar call. It scared me. And but about 6 months after that, I got saved. Paul was the best man in our wedding. He's a lifelong friend. He was one of the parking lot ushers in our church. Paul's a big guy. He's 2 full meters. And because he's so tall, he bends over to shake everybody's hand. And he's friendly as the day is long. So anybody that comes up here, my name's Paul. My name's Paul. Real friendly. And when you guys over 2 meters, you just, he towers over you. And so he was out in the parking lot and the service was going on. We had what we called a 20-minute rule. That means you're working the parking lot. You're going to stay there till 20 minutes into the service because people come in late. So this older woman drove up. Paul walked up, opened that car door, took her by the hand, and helped her out of the car. She just looked at him. She was short. She just looked at him. Brought her into the church, found her a seat. She never said a word. At the end of that service, she gave her life to Jesus. And then she told me her story. She said, I wasn't coming to church. I thought this was a grocery store. I was coming to buy milk and eggs. But that man was so nice. He reached out and helped me. Stretch out your hand. That woman's name was Ruth Weimer. She stayed in our church till the day she went to heaven because somebody stretched out their hand. Are you listening? Are you listening? You're coming to one of the greatest seasons you have of evangelism. One of the greatest seasons you have of reaching people. Don't waste it. Don't throw it away. We used to, I'm going to end on this one. We got about 5 more minutes. We got 5 more minutes. This is good. This is good. This is good. You only hit the ones you love. You only hit the ones you love. So anyhow, we used to have on and off about twice a year what we called it Bring a Friend Sunday. I told people, I said, don't invite people to church. Don't invite people. The word invitation is not in the Bible. There's 4 Gospels. In those 4 Gospels, it uses this word all the time. And they brought. and they brought, and they brought. That's what it's all over the four Gospels. And they, I don't know who they are, but they is us. You say they didn't invite, they brought. There's a difference between inviting and bringing. If I invite you, you got an option. If I'm bringing you, you're coming. So we used to bring a friend Sunday, and I'd tell people, I want you to write the names of 7 people that you know that are either lost or unchurched for whatever reason, gone away from God. And we're going to spend 1 month. I believe in prayer. We're going to bathe this thing in prayer. We're going to lift their name before God. We're going to do it in every service. I want you to do it every day, but we're going to see those people come into Christ. We're going to bathe them in prayer. And then right when we come up to that Sunday, don't go too far in advance. People forget. And you walk up to them and you say, this Sunday is Bring a Friend Sunday. You're my friend. I'll bring you to church. And we'll take you out to eat afterwards. Changes the dynamics. The moment you say you're my friend, how can you turn me down? So one of the guys that worked, that was in our church, he worked for the government. He had a co-worker by the name of Ernesto. Let me tell you something about Ernesto. Ernesto was one of the original Navy SEALs. That's bad. You're bad. He did 3 tours in Vietnam. 3 tours, 9-month tours, almost 3 years in Vietnam. He was an original Navy SEAL when they started. He did 3 tours in Vietnam. He was a tunnel rat and a diver. Now, if you know anything about the Vietnam War, you know that the Viet Cong lived in tunnels. I've been in those tunnels. They dug them out. And they were inside of them. He had to go in those tunnels. Either he comes out or they come out. We're both not coming out. Then he was a diver, so when a plane went down, he had to dive in and pull out. Usually they were deceased. He had to pull out that pilot, co-pilot, had to pull them out of the wreck. By the time Ernesto came out of the Vietnam War, he was messed up. He had blown up his marriage, became an alcoholic. Used to drink 1/5 of vodka a day. Fast forward, years later, he's working for the government because you can't lose your job. At least you can't in America. And anyhow, so now we're in to Bring a Friend. Years later, and this guy walks up to him and he says, this Sunday, you know the whole thing, bring a friend, you're my friend, you're coming. And Ernesto said, I ain't coming. People, just because somebody turns you down, it means they want you to pursue them. He wouldn't let up. 3 days. You're coming, Ernesto. Ernesto finally said, okay. He said, I'll come once. And then leave me alone. Leave me alone. He said, okay, great. So he came. And he said, he told me later, he said he put me right in the middle of a section. People all around me. I couldn't get out. And he said, I don't know when it happened, but he said somewhere in the service, he said he just broke out in this horrible sweat. He just was wet. And then he told me this. He said, I don't know how it happened. I have no memory of it. But the next thing I know, I was standing in front of you. And I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And all those years of garbage started coming out of me. Ernesto became our children's church pastor. He married Vivian. I did the wedding, the former Miss New Mexico. Ernesto did good. As I'm speaking to you tonight, Ernesto's in his 70s, and he pastors a church in Galveston, Texas. He's an amazing individual, all because somebody stretched out their hand. Somebody. How many Ernestos are out there? How many tens of thousands of men and women are just like him? The only thing they're waiting is for you and I to stretch out our hand and say, I'm bringing you. I'm bringing you. Stand up with me. Stand up with me. Stand up with me. Stand up with me. I want you to make a decision as we come into this season. It's a great season of evangelism. It's a great season. Let's don't waste it. Let's get names. Let's start praying. And then let's reach, stretch out your hand. And the life that you extend will be the life of God. It's amazing, isn't it?